Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson became outlaws in country music when they won the right to record with any producer and studio musicians they preferred. For decades, the record companies made such decisions, but in the early 1970s, Waylon and Willie began crafting a narrative that condemned their first RCA producer, Chet Atkins, the legendary guitarist who ran RCA's Nashville offices. Few people had contributed more to Nashville's ascent as a recording center in the 1950s and 1960s than the beloved Atkins, but in the eyes of Waylon and Willie, he was the man who dictated their sound and their repertory. In the Outlaw story, Chet had to be removed in order to liberate Waylon and Willie. One could pin outlaw patches on dozens of men and women who discarded Nashville's old recipes in the late 1960s and early 1970s, such as recording artists Roger Miller and Bobby Bare and producers Fred Foster and Jack Clement. But Kristofferson, Jennings, and Nelson became Stone Mountain in outlaw lore. Predictably, music executives capitalized on the excitement over the new independence and created a companion marketing label, the Outlaw movement, which in the minds of concert promoters and label bosses encompassed singers with cussed attitudes who dressed like Jesse James. Any one of them could have passed for a member of the Marshall Tucker Band, the Southern Rockers whom Waylon toured with and whose gold record hit Can't You See he covered in 1976. Indeed, their solemn photos cranked up the appeal of RCA's Wanted, The Outlaws, a 1976 compilation featuring Waylon, Willie, Jesse Coulter, and Tom Paul Glaser that became country music's first platinum album and introduced the Outlaw label to the masses. Save for Kristofferson's activism on behalf of the United Farm Workers and other causes, the scene proved vacuous politically. Definitely more of a Jimmy Buffett invitation to hard partying than a call to social responsibility. But amid the hippie girls who stripped off their halter tops at Waylon's shows and magazine advertisements for Willie's belt buckles, the independence these men inspired rang through Nashville. As other recording artists took control of their own sessions, staff producers lost their jobs and record companies sold their Nashville studios. RCA, CBS, ABC, and the rest became packagers and marketers of Nashville-based artists, from Eddie Arnold to Tammy Wynette. To nobody's surprise, the music made by the Chief Outlaws proved just as influential as their dilution of corporate control. Kristofferson inspired a singer-songwriter tide in the 1970s that swept up Rodney Crowell, Rosanne Cash, and Mary Chapin Carpenter, major stars in the 1980s. While the PG overtones of his songs echo still in today's country music. Kristofferson had arrived in Nashville in 1965 and struggled for years for recognition, working odd jobs while attempting to rein in a songwriting style that owed more to the English poet William Blake, whom he had studied in college, than to the honky-tonk King Hank Williams, whom he idolized. When Blake and Bocephus finally merged in Kristofferson's verse, song publisher and record company owner Fred Foster stepped forward to sign him. Plenty of observers, including Foster's business partners, believed Kristofferson belonged back on the Nashville streets, where he had rambled and drank and soaked up songs. But by 1970, he was the talk of Nashville. Johnny Cash, Roger Miller, and Ray Price recorded his songs, and hip nightclubs on the coasts embraced him. Songwriters copied his style and explored his themes, and radio stations decided that a little modern maturity sung in a Dylan style could live in the country music format. Of course, Waylon Jennings rarely missed a play on the country music airwaves. Ever since his first session with RCA in 1965, his records routinely hit the charts, although they rarely climbed very high. He'd come from West Texas by way of Phoenix, where he and his band, the Wailers, had hammered out a restless union of country and rock inspired by his association with Buddy Holly in the 1950s, and the demands of the young Beatles-influenced fans who flocked to Phoenix clubs to see him. However, Chet Atkins paid little mind to Waylon's rock and roll orientation. He plied him with songs from Nashville's songwriting machine and the contemporary folk catalog.